So, just formally welcoming everybody and acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land that I'm seated on, the Dharawal people. I'd like to pay my respect to elders past, present, and emerging, and acknowledge the ongoing custodianship and care that the Indigenous people of Australia continue to offer the land and the community that we work, play, and rest on. And just acknowledging that you're dialing in from different places as well, some across Australia, some beyond. And Raymond's actually dialing in from Hong Kong, which is where he lives at the moment, though he has lived in Australia. So we can get to that in a moment. And he likes lamingtons. So I think that's a pretty good start for us. So thank you all for being here. I'm going to read your bio, Raymond, and then we can have a very relaxed conversation about the topic today.
Sure.
So Raymond Lam is a senior writer at Buddhistdoor Global. His religion journalism covers macro trends in the Buddhist world. He writes with the goal of grounding the Dharma's story and Buddhist figures in wider socio-cultural, intellectual, and historical frameworks. He looks at religion's interaction with diplomacy, politics, and the arts. Raymond is on the professional committee of the Foreign Correspondence Club, Hong Kong, and on the executive committee of the International Network of Engaged Buddhists. So thank you so much, Raymond, for making the time. And it's been really lovely getting to know you over the past few months and reading some of your terrific work. I've actually admired you for some time. So
Oh,
it's,
thank you.
yeah.
It's an honor. Thank you.
And I also think the title Buddhist journalist is very cool as well. So we can talk more about what that means
Sure.
exactly.
Absolutely. Thank you so
Yeah.
much. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. So your career obviously is very unique and you found your way into Buddhist journalism. And I'm wondering if there was a moment in time when you realized this was the work that you wanted to do, or if this was something that was very gradual and organic that happened over time.
I think it would be the latter. It was relatively organic, although I'd always been interested in religions. So that was my first love. I'd done high school in Brisbane, and then I uh, started a BA in religion and philosophy back at UQ. These days, the I think the department is a little different, but um, I was very interested in studying religion. And along the way, I grew up agnostic, so I wasn't born a Buddhist. And along the way, I sort of thought, well, I've basically invested my academic and professional uh, life into this BA, so I might as well just, fully commit to the role. And I sort of, set off on this spiritual path into Buddhism, although it took some time. And then after the BA, I kind of sort of encountered in Hong Kong after graduation, Mr. Robert Ho, the late Mr. Robert Ho. I know nothing about him or his family's history in Hong Kong, but he was the founder of Buddhistdoor Global, and I started a sort of not internship, but just sort of helping him with his website, uh, getting to know the small team there. It was actually very unprofessional at the beginning. There were no paid reporters or editors on the payroll at the time. It was almost like a volunteer project. And I, as I was helping, I then ended up in the UK doing a master's at Buddhist Studies at SOAS. And actually, that was the period of the Leveson Inquiry. I don't know if anyone knows their journalism, but like basically, the News of the World had been implicated in a phone hacking scandal. And there were these reporters that were being kind of called in to testify about the ethics of journalism under Rupert Murdoch, since, as everybody knows, Murdoch is the one of the last remaining press barons of the age and the most powerful. And at that time, that was the moment when I realized why Mr. Ho himself owned newspapers back in Hong Kong in the day, in the 60s. And I sort of realized, wow, journalism, for all its problems and for all its issues, still shapes and informs the civic life of the Western world and many, many other many other locations, even those that we might not necessarily see as having freedom of speech. And then I thought, look, Mr. Ho's vision of, having a Buddhist website, because I was already doing some, getting some pocket money from helping out. Um, I thought, you know what? His vision is actually very powerful. To bring together his love of newspapers, because he used to himself be a White House correspondent back in the day with National Geographic. Um,
Mm.
so Mr. Robert Ho, this sort of scion of a old Hong Kong family, Hong Kong business family, sort of very invested in philanthropic work with Buddhism. And I said, look, if you'll have me, I'd like to, I'd rather not do the scholarship thing anymore. And then, once I'm done with London, I'll come back to Hong Kong. And, as long as you'll have me, I'll work with you full time. And so that was actually the very early days. And then over time, I've come to see my role as a stable but evolving kind of role within the organization. And a lot of things have changed since, back then. But the position of Buddhist journalism continues to be fairly relevant, I think, in today's Buddhist world.
So when are we talking? When was the inception? When were these discussions that you describe?
Oh, ancient history by now, 2012.
Uh-huh,
2012.
uh-huh,
Yeah, yeah.
uh-huh. Yeah,
2012. And so, I wouldn't be a journalist. The irony is I wouldn't be a journalist without Buddhism.
yeah.
I don't know if, if you told me, if you told me that I would become a journalist without that religious dimension, I'm actually not sure if I would still take that career path. But anyway, that's a alternative universe. But yeah.
Okay, yeah, thank you. I mean, religious journalism or religion journalism sits at this really interesting interface or intersection.
Yeah.
And, often we see journalism as a secular pursuit, and religion as something else, non-secular. And
Yeah.
I wondered if your journalism does engage with spiritual ways of knowing, or if you see your journalism as secular and factual. What's your take on that?
Yes, such an interesting question. Thank you. Thank you for posing that question, because I think it's a dilemma and a methodological question that we responsible religion journalists have to wrestle with every day. So I think mass communication and religion have been intertwined with each other for a very long time. It's the motivation for the cult of meritorious copying of Buddhist scriptures since ancient times. It's what led to woodblock printing in China. So you've got the earliest Tang Dynasty era woodblock printing of the Diamond Sutra in the British Library. You can go see it today. And the famous Western example, the Gutenberg Bible, the first mass printed um, Bible in Europe that sort of revolutionized public access to religious material. The issue with journalism is that it's kind of been fused with Enlightenment notions of secularism and
Yes.
free speech and kind of, it's the scientific revolution, like this kind of wave of Enlightenment thinking, including idealized visions of the fourth estate and whatnot. But I think Buddhism and journalism both seek insight. They both seek insight. They both seek the truth in an ideal form. I think the best kind of journalism, and we might talk about this later, is a journalism that is mindful, self-aware, and also empathetic, because journalists are storytellers. And if I'm not sure why you're in the business if you're not interested in telling stories. And so we might tell our story in a different way to novelists or other writers, but we're storytellers at heart. And then, of course, in my context in Asia, and if you're talking about Buddhist Asia particularly, this whole mass of thinking overlaps with, notions of post-colonialism,
Mm.
The different journalistic traditions, the journalist culture here, media culture, ecosystem here is not the same as in Europe or the States for that matter. Um, and also this whole supremely diverse range of religious experiences, of religious traditions that is not shared by the rest of the world.
Yeah, that's really very interesting and rich answer, Raymond. And you've got me thinking on all sorts of levels. I think you might have mentioned to me when we spoke last that you had a book on your counter that was talking a little bit
Yes.
more about the
Yeah, yeah.
intersection
It's
between religion and journalism. It was like a Routledge book. And I
Routledge. Yeah,
thought,
credible. You can get it. You can search it and you can get it. It's a very good book.
It's yeah. I mean, in a way, I think that there are a few ways in, like
Mm,
telling the story of religion, which you do a
yeah.
beautiful job of, and then there's also, as you say, drawing on religious values, in this case, mindfulness,
Yes.
and sensitivity and compassion and cultural awareness,
Yeah.
and you can use your Buddhist practice in a beautiful way to support that work. So there are a few ways to think
Yeah.
about this. Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you. Okay. So, how do you balance this kind of editorial independence while serving a Buddhist readership? Because I understand that the Buddhist Store is supported by your
Yes.
founder's vision,
Yes. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
so in this way there might be some tension that arises at
Yeah. Yeah.
times.
Yeah.
Is that the
Absolutely.
case? Yeah. Yeah.
Well, full credit to the late Mr. Ho and our current board of directors. They give us very, very solid editorial autonomy. I think I think they go in with this idea of you know an egalitarian and a um, independent message of Dharma. This is non-sectarian. We are not here to necessarily push a single tradition. In fact, one of the big missions of Mr. Ho, when he said that your guys' job is to be non-sectarian, and actually that poses a lot of challenges for us because how do you balance the Theravada, Mahayana, and Vajrayana traditions?
Yes.
For example, I myself am a practicing Vajrayana Buddhist, and
Yes.
much of my work, but as from a professional angle, a lot of my sort of contacts are Vajrayana monks and leaders, that kind of thing. So, but then you've got to balance it. You can't just tell that story, and so you've got to really be mindful of that. And then on top of that, there's also this whole sort of, I guess, insider outsider dichotomy that actually academics like yourself have probably encountered in conversations. Um, do are we journalists believing in a religion, or are we religious people practicing journalism? Um,
Yes.
I thought, in my, when I was younger, when I first started this whole shtick, I thought the difference, was that religion journalists tend to be practicing adherents or believers of the faith that we are covering. So I might be a Vatican reporter, in Italy, but I just started off as, a Catholic, and then I just, stumbled into, working for a newspaper covering Vatican affairs, something like that. Um, but now I'm not so sure, because I could give a couple of examples, exaggerated ones. For example, an editor of a major Australian newspaper who regularly wines and dines with our politicians, right? Are they insiders? I think it's fair to say that they would be pretty insider. Or, we talk about a few months ago, they had the new Devil Wears Prada sequel, right? And that it's a very good look into a fashion magazine sort of symbiotic relationship with the fashion houses. They kind of,
Yeah.
they're very much part of the same ecosystem, if I may say so. So I think we it's a difficult question, and I think what we are here to do is to bring bring our subjective learning, training, and empathy into into a religious story that is very fluid, complicated, and a living tradition. And so it's not something that you simply, you don't look at it from above and just sort of talk about it. You're in it. You're kind of in it, and you're kind of talking to people who are just as invested as you are in its development, in its propagation. So I think that's what we need. We need a degree of humility. We're subjective beings, and we're just here to, I guess, inform, inspire, and invite. We are not missionaries. I do not see my role as one of a Dharma Banaka in one sense, like preaching Dharma. That's not my or my colleagues' job. So very much like a typical reporter, we try to maintain that relative feedback distance.
Yeah, that's beautiful. In a way, you've kind of troubled this notion of editorial independence and neutrality. And I think you did a really beautiful job of that, pointing to the fact that journalists have got political influence. They're setting the discourse. They're often, as you say,
Yep.
in relationship with certain political parties and certain ways of viewing the world. And so to think that there is such a thing as, complete independence would be misleading. So I
Yep.
love that you troubled that. And I also think that you highlight the fact that, self-awareness and humility puts you in a really good position when it comes to reporting on these developments. And we can't say that all journalists share that, but we can
Yeah,
say with some confidence that Buddhistdoor journalists do share that. And that's a very fantastic thing. So thank you.
I
And I
hope so.
also,
Yeah.
yes, yes. Yes, good evidence there. I was just going to make one last point about what you shared, Raymond, and I think that the fact that it is funded by Buddhists, and so in that sense, there is an investment in reporting on Dharma developments and capturing for the record, the cultural aspects of Buddhism and what's happening in contemporary times. And before Buddhistdoor, I mean, there are a few other Buddhist publications that I'm aware of anyway, like Tricycle and Lion's Roar and Shambhala,
Right. Yeah.
that were very kind of American centric and were telling a very particular story and a very inspiring story for people like me,
Yeah.
young
Sure.
young Buddhists.
Sure.
But then when I started to read Buddhistdoor, I started to get a different story, a more global picture, and that was really welcome for a reader. Yeah, yeah,
Thank you very much. Full credit to our friends at Tricycle Lions Roar. Uh, I want to stress, like, this is a very small ecosystem of Buddhist journalism. We are not in competition with anybody. We are here. I think everybody has their own strengths, and actually, we need more publications and platforms to spread the Buddhist message in a credible way. I think
absolutely.
Lions
And you
Roar
can
and
only do so much. I mean, you can only do a slice like Lion's Roar does, and you're doing a slice and so on and so forth. So yeah,
yeah,
really
yeah,
lovely. Okay.
yeah.
So part of your role involves interviewing leading Buddhist teachers, scholars, practitioners from all around the world.
Mm.
And I'm sure that that has been a really enriching experience for you and has informed your practice and who you are
Yeah,
as a person.
yeah,
What surprised you, Raymond, in those conversations? Anything?
yeah. That's a fantastic question. If I can confess something, I feel like as if many Buddhist masters and many Buddhist institutions, they haven't really caught up with what I've been talking with you right now about, the whole complexity and richness of I guess, the media or journalistic enterprise. I've encountered many instances where, you know, we're seen as one of two extremes, either simply a press agent here to simply repeat and disseminate what, you know, uh, the Buddhist institution wants to say, or a muckraker. So we're either stenographers or muckrakers. So muckrakers, as in we're just looking for trouble. We're just looking on the hunt for, something juicy, possibly even scandalous, right? And I think we're neither. we're neither. We're not looking for trouble necessarily. I have reported on scandals before, but they're not they're not our bread and butter. But we're also not press agents. We're not PR, right? So I think Buddhist institutions have a lot of growing and learning to do because I think they haven't really they're still trying to figure us out what exactly is the role of the media. And the role of the media is to actually spread awareness, inspire, tell a story about them. And then I think when I explain this to many Buddhist masters and many uh teachers, then they actually say, okay, you guys are allies, but very different allies, in a way that we haven't really known before. So I think we're all in this together. I think we we have a lot of potential to work together with many of the Buddhist masters. I think the vast 99% of them are very open to what our work is. Many monasteries, many temples, and many centers, they don't have many means to tell their stories, because it's usually um, just their master, just their teacher talking about things. Of course, the picture changes with very major figures, like His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Recently I spoke with Yongey Mingyur Rinpoche, and then we've got some other big heavyweights like the royal family in Bhutan, and the central monastic body, the Karmapa. So, but that's kind of like a different level. Like that's then when you talk about those figures, you're kind of talking about the bigger story of Buddhism, and that's a different story.
Mm. Yeah, thank you. Very
Yeah,
interesting. And in a way, like this conversation is even surprising me because I'm learning so much from you. And I've never really thought about the place of the media in relation to Buddhism. And so you're giving me a completely different vantage point. And I think I can imagine that some people might feel suspicious, and then other people
yeah,
might see it as a platform simply to put forward their story. But you're offering
mm,
something different. And I really liked what I think what you say in your bio about linking certain developments to broader social and cultural trends
yeah,
so that we can understand things from like a bigger perspective, beyond
yeah.
Buddhism, yeah, in a way.
Yeah, can I give an example of this sort of like dilemma that I face with some senior masters is that um you might do an interview,
Yes.
and I'm not going to name them, but they end up talking about their teachings and just continuing to talk and talk and talk about their teachings, about the doctrine, about the what they think is important, and that's great. That's very important. But then you think, well, what we should be framing the discussion in a different way, because otherwise, they could simply just release that book or something, right? Like we have a very unique role in actually telling their story, along with blending in all these other ideas like doctrine, Dharma teachings, uh, what's at stake, what is at stake when I tell your story, so
Yes.
it's not easy suddenly when you think. I remember my a long time ago, my dad once sort of half jokingly asked me, is there that much to talk about? Is there that much to write about in this new job of yours? What is this? And many years later, I can say, yeah, it's actually getting more difficult the older I get. The older I get, and hopefully wiser I get, it's actually more
The more
difficult.
you see, yeah. Yeah, so true. I always love those like articles that have that strange rhetorical device where you like the journalist will say like I'm sitting here with Raymond and he's wearing a blue shirt and he's talking about Buddhism and the media, and you get a sense somehow that you're looking in on the conversation.
Yeah.
And so yeah, when you were describing those masters, it's like, for many of us who aren't of that tradition, we're
Mm.
interested in looking in rather than
Yeah.
being part of the discussion. And yeah, that's what you offer, I think, a story from that vantage point. So yeah, thank you. Okay. The next question really is about how Buddhism has been depicted in mainstream media. And so by and
Yeah.
large, mindfulness and well-being has been the leading themes.
Mm,
And you tell quite a different story. In a way, you're not so much focused on this particular technique or approach. And you tell a lot of stories about Buddhism that have been overlooked by mainstream media. And so I wanted
yeah.
to know more about the types of conversations you'd like to see more of and just some of those gaps that you're plugging through Buddhistdoor. Yeah.
Well, if I know magazine is dying, magazine reading is dying these days, but if you saw the most recent cover of Time magazine, it is a story about um His Holiness the Dalai Lama and the future of Buddhist diplomacy in regards to Tibet and China, right? And so what I'm very interested in is this whole idea of Buddhism's place, its influence on and by diplomacy and politics. Um, if I can give an example, I've worked for many years with the Indian consulate in Hong Kong. We're since 2014, and uh, India's position with Buddhism is very interesting, because there's a domestic aspect of Ambedkarite Buddhism, and versus a kind of more urbanite Hindu domestic consumption kind of Buddhism in the cities, and there's also sort of like an outward kind of diplomatic face of Buddhism, with India to um, trying to wrest control of the narrative from China and from other countries about who in Asia is the rightful custodian of Buddhism. And so this is a big story that I've been following for many years, and it's something that China is very invested in, especially as His Holiness gets older. Uh, so yes, mindfulness and meditation are critical. So I don't want to be downplaying any of these other frameworks in which we understand the global Buddhist story. But I think it is fundamentally impoverishing if we
Mhm.
don't understand Buddhism within its uh, sort of grander history and its grander story in influencing societies, in influencing cultures, and also as much like Christianity or Islam or other great faiths, it has its place in the statecraft of some of the biggest economies and most important countries in the world, in the most largest economic zone in the world, right? So I don't, as a journalist, I don't think this kind of thing can be overlooked.
Yes, I love that. And,
Yeah.
a passion of mine in the past has been looking at the political dimensions of religion and looking at the religious dimensions of politics, right? Because it
Yes.
goes both ways. I mean, we say that the state is separate to the church. We say that. But in truth, when you look at it, and I'm not talking about party politics, I'm talking about little p politics,
Yep.
there are politics on either side
Yep.
and hierarchy and power play and agenda setting. And there's nothing wrong with politics, right? I mean, just it's not a dirty word, I don't think.
Yep.
But it's important to expose and talk about politics because as
Yep.
soon as we don't see them or we pretend they're not there, then they have
Yeah.
a mind of their own, right?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I don't want to romanticize politics, but politics is very much a part of our lives. You're not if you're and it's in the same way as religion affects all kinds of different aspects of diplomacy, the arts, culture, literature, and politics does the same thing. And I like to think that religion journalism is not as glamorous, maybe, as fashion journalism or politics, but it actually lies behind a lot of what's going on. If you just go forward, step in a few steps in every major world story. Actually, there's always I think, a spiritual dimension hiding behind it, you know. And then, of course, there's also the scholarship. aspect. And I do want to shout out Nantian Institute for the critical role that the institution plays in Wollongong, in Australia, as a hub of Buddhist studies. Because although I don't have a PhD, I myself come from that Buddhist studies tradition. And I believe very much in that traditional humanities aspect of learning inside the academy in a sort of secular non-Buddhist setting. It's
Mhm.
especially important these days given all the, terrible things happening to the humanities.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you
Mm,
so much for saying that, Raymond. I've got my colleague Van Bushway Way, the head of Buddhist Studies, here with me.
mm,
And I think that the work that we're doing is particularly vital at the moment. And we may well
yeah,
be, a final bastion when it comes to the humanities, but it's really worth fighting for. I mean,
mm,
humanities has changed my very core. And so
yeah,
I'm sure a lot of people would agree with that. Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you. So the next question really is about being a Buddhist writer. And it's interesting because some of the books that really changed me early in my journey, um, I pick up now and they don't have as much currency or grip. It's almost like discourse dies. I often think discourse dies and something new emerges. And so, like, I'm often thinking about some of the older generation and their Dharma books. Who I'm sure those Dharma books still inspire, but I think we have a very kind of contemporary context at play at the moment that might actually impact Buddhist writing. And so I was thinking, like, what makes good Buddhist writing today, like in contemporary times? Is there anything that you can point to or articulate, Raymond?
Well, just to build on your point, I think the Buddhist literature that might have inspired us 20 years ago probably seems a bit outdated now. We are subjective beings moving through time, subject to impermanence, and selflessness, just like anybody else. And I think a self-awareness is a very good, it would be a very good quality for making a Buddhist writer. If a Buddhist writer has self-awareness and they are radically mindful of the age that they live in, I think they can write very relevant and timely and helpful content for, their audience or their readers. I think, of course, a Buddhist writer should be inspired, I think, by their tradition. They should be motivated by the possibility of transcending suffering and all
Mm,
that good stuff that we find in the Buddhist tradition. And I also think go back to what we were talking about before, this sort of this deep
mm,
empathy of really vibing, one could say, with the stories of people, the way people try to transform their minds, the way people try to look at things differently, and also the journey of the Buddhist monasteries, across the world, from the newest, set up in New York, all the way to this little temple in Ladakh, right? Our interests must be large. Our interests, we must be generous and broad
mhm.
with our interests in what we cover. So so I think, yeah, you've just got to love samsara while also understanding you're trying to transcend it. There's that Mahayana
Yeah,
duality there. Yeah.
I love that. It's almost like an anthropological spirit that you're pointing to, this sense that you are interested in the life worlds of different people, people that aren't
Yeah.
necessarily like you, and you
Yes.
lead with that curiosity. And I love that. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that's really cool. Um, Something I wanted to say about discourse and Buddhist writing. That's what I was going to say. I think also, like, you made me think about covering some of the darker sides of the Buddhist
Yes.
story. And so,
Right.
it is very tempting to tell a good news story about the Dharma,
Yeah. Yeah.
particularly because we are in the minority. In
Yeah.
Australia, it's less than 3% of people. And
Yeah.
so, in a way, we can. be a little bit vulnerable to
Yeah.
criticism and other people's agendas. And so we want to have a firm base, but at the same time, we want the luxury to be able to tell a complex story and move
Yeah.
beyond rhetoric, right? Move
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
beyond
Yeah.
the rhetorical story that people have been given. And I think that happens, like that kind of tension is present for me here as well, because a lot of students come to Nantien because they've heard the good news story from Tricycle or Lions Roar, and like
All
it's
right. I see.
inspired them, and it's
Yeah.
lovely, and it's really exciting. And then
Yeah.
I say, and there are
Mm.
darker sides to mindfulness, and sometimes mindfulness is contraindicated, and it doesn't apply in
Yeah.
all contexts. And then I'm like, oh, am I scaring people? And like I have this kind of problem in my mind. And
Yeah. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
being able to do the bright and dark is super important,
Yes.
I think. And I think people really relate to that authenticity, even if you do kind of, even if you're a bit exposed in doing that. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it came to
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah. 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 Don't be afraid of the shadow self. I think, for example, in a culturally dominant, in a culture where Buddhism is dominant, like in Thailand, I mean, but Thai Buddhism has almost become a meme in itself. I mean, like they've busted like a monastery with like monks, who were hiding crack cocaine, right? Like, I mean, like maintain some humor, I think, in the whole reporting of it all, because there can be some very absurd and crazy stories. And the darker side of mindfulness is, if anything, quite. I think it's quite tame. I think it's, I think it's something that everybody should know, and we can never have too. Just a balanced perspective would be good.
Yeah, yeah, that's great. Well, I mean, in a way, it's like coming from a very secure position rather than thinking, oh, we're going to be, we can't reveal our cards. It's coming from a position of, no, we're established in the
Exactly.
West and
Yeah.
beyond, of course, but we're established in the West, even if it felt tenuous at times some years ago.
Yeah.
I think Buddhism has got a strong role here. Okay, so the other question that brings about a lot of panic within me and is a saucy topic relates to AI. And actually, just this morning, I got a troubling email from a huge news provider who was doing a review into freelance writing. And
Yes.
I had this sinking feeling in my stomach that the cost of writing is decreasing very rapidly because of AI, and that potentially freelancers across the world, tens of thousands of freelancers in the next little while, may well be impacted by
Yes.
AI. And that industry is quite vulnerable at the moment. So I wondered if you could say a little bit about how AI is changing the future of writing and journalism from your perspective, Raymond. And just to say, there's also opportunities, of course, and I don't mean to tell a
Mm.
bad story, but this is just what was on my mind this morning. Yeah.
There's actually, before this talk, I wanted to share a link with you, Nadine. It was a news report in the Independent, or some other newspaper, where there was a law school in the UK that has banned AI
Mhm.
because its students, um for the reasoning, based on the reasoning, its students need to learn critical thinking
Mhm.
before they can use AI. Right. And I found that very interesting. I think a lot of the fear, and legitimate fear, around AI is that it kind of stymies critical thinking. It gives you, a certain result, a certain product, without you having actually done the work. And people are increasingly devaluing the work that goes into it. The painful irony is that this work, crafting a paper, crafting sort of coherent thoughts that you can present as an argument, right, was exactly why people would engage into the humanities in the first place. And I think now it's become very rare. It's becoming increasingly rare. I think I share your perspective that AI poses fundamental challenges to how we even behave as human beings. And we must be very, very careful with how we use it. The whole jobs and employment restructuring of the entire global economy. I mean, I'm not an economist. I can't speak on that, but I think that will be very significant. But it's so interesting how just last year we celebrated our 30th anniversary, our website, and we went to Vancouver, and the 1 day conference we actually did to celebrate was a conference on AI with our speakers talking, our columnists talking about what are the implications for the Buddhist world. And I think I can only agree with our new American Pope, very popular Pope Leo the 14th, on the fact that is not AI replicates. It does not. It's not sentient. It even acknowledges that it's not sentient. And so I think we need to bear in mind that fundamental importance between serving sentient beings and relating to AI. They're two very different things. Unfortunately, many of our young people do not seem to be able to discern the difference. I think it is actually the older generation's role to provide some of that guidance to help discern the difference between AI and true sentient beings.
Yeah, it's really a difficult conversation because I think increasingly I've seen AI articles pop up. And while at the moment it is easy to discern it if you're a reader and a writer yourself, I think it's going to become increasingly better with time. And it does worry me that, in 5 years' time, someone like you might be under threat because, there's a bot that can create articles in your voice
Yeah.
and appear to be sentient or at least capture sentience somehow. And so there may be a real change in your industry as a result of this.
See, I think one of the most sobering and beautiful things about religion is that it teaches human um the fact that we are finite. Human beings are finite creatures, and that there can be something as too much, and that there can be something, uh, you know, that sort of debases and devalues what makes us human if we do too much of it. And I think, we had this discussion about social media a long time ago, but now AI is at the
Mm.
forefront of fundamentally challenging, not what it means to be human, but basically challenging how we see ourselves, and that's a little bit scary. In some ways, we are our own worst enemy in treasuring ourselves, in seeing what is most valuable in us is our sentience and our sort of limitations as human beings. And I'm thinking, we are in big trouble because we are being led by fundamentally arrogant people who do not understand their own limitations. And when you don't understand your own limitations, you're gonna go off the deep end. I won't mention those certain billionaires here, but like,
Yeah. And I think in a way, like there's a tipping point in a way, like, using technology to assist us and enhance our humanity is one thing. But when technology starts to take away opportunities or limit our humanity, then we really need to be able to see, this tipping point is happening. What can we do? How can we resist? How can we, enlist our kind of democratic voice to
yeah.
respond to this? But it's hard to work out what platforms are available to us since this is a, transnational problem. So, yeah, thank you. Thank you. Well, I really hope that you can continue to write for many, many decades to come. Um, Finally, I've been thinking a lot about voice, which is not something I tend to think about, but I was asked to talk about voice as a concept, and I read some really lovely stuff about what it means to have a voice, but also what it means to have a platform, right? And
Yeah.
so, like, we all have a voice, but our voice isn't always platformed, and certain voices are platformed over others. And we need to make space for diversity in voices. And I think, some people who are here and also some people who will listen back to this conversation are in the process of developing their own voice as a Buddhist, potentially a Buddhist writer. And we absolutely encourage our students here to develop their voice, their authentic voice. And so I wondered if you had
Yes.
any advice for those who are in that process at the moment.
Well, at the risk of sounding really, really corny and cheesy, look, as a writer, I think it is necessary to tell yourself that no one else has your own voice. I have Raymond's voice. You have Nadine's voice. Everybody in this room has their own voice. And it's the same thing with AI. That yes, maybe in the future, I don't know what AI will do, steal my personal data, like they'll do some sort of Mission Impossible thing, cover themselves with my face, and then there'll be a copy Raymond or something like that. But until then, AI cannot replicate you. AI cannot replicate you. And from a Buddhist perspective, I think about, the very aptly named Lines Raw magazine. What does Lines Raw symbolize? It symbolizes the Buddha's voice, right? But I also want to hear the mouse's squeak. I want to hear the birds, sing the song, right? I want to hear the elephants, big trumpeting, right? I want to hear the richness of diversity in different voices. I don't just want to hear the lines. And so I think individuality and diversity actually are not as contradictory as it seems. In fact, the more individuals come out with their own voice, the more diverse and rich our platforms can be. Of course, we need to provide those platforms. That's a challenge for publishers and for institutions, for universities. But we will get there if people are mindful. Again, if we are mindful and empathetic, we can get there.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And, there's a venture here that Venerable Shui Wei is involved in, which is a journal on studies of humanistic Buddhism, and that encourages the student voice. And so unlike other, publishers where there's a real emphasis on, seasoned academics, getting people
Yep.
to publish in spaces like that with support is really a beautiful step in the direction of supporting the diversity of people's voices. I was also thinking about, there was a lovely book I was reading about this concept of neuroqueering, it's called, and it's like thinking about, for those who are neurodiverse, they may well have
Yes.
a different voice that is not recognizable in the public discourse. Like, for example, there may be something that looks a bit different,
Yeah.
hesitation, or it's not a polished voice in that sense. And so how do we start to make space for non-polished voices that, don't necessarily have proficiency in the rhetoric or in being an orator, and
Yeah.
and how can we platform people with different types of voices? And I think that's a really beautiful invitation for Nantian, but also other spaces as well, where you have a platform and you think like, is this, this is just one type of voice, or are there other people speaking here? So, because we want a chorus, as you
Absolutely.
say, a
A chorus, exactly.
a cacophony of voices. Yes, yes,
Yes.
good. Makes us better as
Yeah.
individuals, I think. Yeah. Great. Well, I've reached the end of my questions. Are there any other comments you'd like to make, Raymond, before I open it up to the floor?
Nothing in particular. Just to build on what you said, just trust in your voice. I
Mhm.
remember the very first thing I wrote way back when I was a kid back in Westlake in Australia, in Brisbane, was a little book about the Loch Ness monster. A complete trash. I mean, like it's not worth the paper it's written on. But I sent it to Scholastic. I sent it to Scholastic. It was a really audacious move, I think, at the time. And I received a rejection letter. But the rejection letter, obviously, the lady who wrote the rejection letter probably knew I was like some sort of like 8-year-old kid or something. And then, she said, look, the story really needs some work, but don't stop writing. And That's the proudest rejection letter I've ever received. And I
Oh,
and I
that's
although I don't know where the letter is now, but um uh you can always have a voice. Just continue to refine it.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Well, look, I've got a similar story to you, Raymond, and that's that I used to get don't know if you remember this scoring system, but we used to get marks out of 20. And in English, I used to
All
get
right.
12s out of 20 for some time.
Yeah.
And they even suggested that I move out of English because English was my second language, actually.
Mm, mm,
And then when I did my PhD, I thought, you know what, I should let them know that I finished a PhD. I had this moment of
yeah.
like, wow, this is wild. But that
Mm,
really got inside me, that marking system.
yeah.
And in a way, maybe it pushed me to do a PhD to prove to myself that I could write.
Exactly.
But I
Exactly.
do think the way we speak to people who are, this is their vulnerable expression. And like, often it takes a lot to write something from your voice, even if it doesn't
Absolutely.
meet the conventions. So
Yep.
how we work with someone if we reject their piece, or if we are working with them collaboratively, it really matters, doesn't it?
Yep.
Yeah. And so I think that
Absolutely.
the story you told is a great example of someone rejecting well.
Rejecting though. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't think I got that privilege, but you know
Ah.
what?
Yeah.
I grew up anyway.
Yeah.
Um, Thank you so much. Okay, so I'm going to open it up now to the floor for any questions. I'm sure you've got some. So the first question comes from Joseph.
Thank you, Nadine, and thank you, Raymond. Very, very insightful. And also, Nadine,
Thank you very
I
much.
thought as the conversation was unfolding, the kind of pressure of interviewing someone who interviews and writes journalistically for their living. So very well handled. I thought all the questions were really good. Raymond, a word that kept on bubbling up as you spoke was stories. You said that one of your roles is to tell a story, and when
Yeah.
you're working with these Buddhist masters or institutions, you're helping them tell their story. So,
Yeah.
and I'm deeply cognizant that storytelling is what humans do.
Yes.
So I had kind of two forking questions. One is, how did you develop the story writing kind of language and voice, if you will, from that is different from academic writing? It kind of is a bit more, well, you can tell me how
Yeah.
you have come to develop that and recognize it, hone it. And also kind of the mirror of that is, how do you help an institution tell its story?
So fantastic two questions. Thank you, Joseph. Um, I think the first question is I think I have to say we have to go old school again. A love of reading, and just a kind of curiosity about things will help you uh, build that identity as a storyteller. So for me, actually, I really enjoyed reading fiction back when I was younger. It's kind of grown rustier these days, but I still have my Kindle. I have my Kindle here. I'm buying books every couple months, on the Kindle, and just trying to read. Not necessarily forcing myself to read everything, but uh, to maintain to be a storyteller, you have to be curious. I think if you don't work that muscle of curiosity, then I think you're going to, the rest, the foundations are not going to be very strong. Um, and then the I think the second question, what sorry, the second question was about the
Helping institutions tell their
right.
story.
Right. Yeah. I can say that Buddhistdoor Global and my mother organizations, they let's just say that they needed our help in telling their story as well. And they and uh it's very difficult because you've got to situate what the institution even does, and you need to into in the broader context of what of the organism of Buddhism. And I think uh, you always have to ask for the reader, what's at stake here? What's at
Mhm.
stake here? Why should someone spend 5 minutes, 10 minutes of their time looking at my words? And once you ask that question, you actually end up being a bit more humble, because it's exactly what I would ask when I'm reading someone else's article. What merits my time? What merits my 5 minutes in looking over their article? And so you suddenly realize, oh my goodness, I spend close to 1 or 2 hours crafting an article, and that's already pretty decent, right? And most people will not spend 5 minutes looking over it. So you've got to be humble, you've got to be curious. And I think those foundational muscles, so to speak, will help you build those skills, in writing.
In a way, like an institution is a character, it has its own like personhood, if you know what I'm saying. And so,
Exactly.
yeah, it's like there is a story there about the institution, but
Yeah,
how you bring that alive is quite difficult. You can really just be bogged down by the details and the inside story. Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. Great. Well, I will think about that one too going forward. So we have another question. Sangamitra. Sorry if I mispronounce your name. You have to unmute. Thank you.
Hello. Good morning.
Hi, great to see you. Hello.
Hello, Raymond. How are you?
I'm good.
Happy to see you again. So my question is, as you mentioned that Buddhist literature is outdated now. So as a beginner, uh, how to develop that skill to make it that Buddhist literature relevant in today's time as well?
Mhm.
Because Buddhist literature is the base. So without that, how can we write about Buddhism, Buddhist teachings? And my
Yeah.
second question is, when writing, what not to do, what not to think when
Oh,
when we
very good
write.
question. Yeah. Yeah. So this is actually when the news does serve a purpose. I think if you really take seriously the idea that Buddhist writing needs to speak to our times, then you need to keep up with the times, right? We were recently at one of our committees. There was this proposal that, let's have a debate. There was some guy who was proposing a debate about climate change with some potential guest, and all of us were like, "My gosh, that is so 2000s, right? This is that's not even fun. It's kind of fight isn't even fun anymore because it's so outdated." So you've got to keep up with the times in terms of keeping up with the news. So I, as a news person, I do think that there is some value in, not being too immersed, but being aware of what's going on in the world. So that's one way. That's the easiest way to kind of keep your writing relevant and to keep things that's why you'll see some of the Buddhist writing these days, as Nadine and I were discussing, we look back on it and it's like, wow, this shows its age. We know when this stuff was written. Let's put it that way. Um, and then the second thing, second question is what not to write, how not to be a writer, if I understand correctly. Uh, uh, I think again, I would, as a Buddhist writer, I think there are limitations to how we can write. So I don't think sarcasm. I don't think we can be too sarcastic. There are certain columnists, like the Spectator's full of them, right? Who make being insufferable and annoying as part of their brand. The Aussie shock jock kind of archetype is one of these brands, right?
Mm.
Like it's not just a personality; it's a distinct career choice. To be inflammatory, to be sarcastic, to be hurtful, right? Now, I think there are certain places for that. Even if I ultimately think that they have taken us, the media world, in a very dark direction, in shaping the current situation. Okay. but I certainly think that it doesn't work for Buddhist journalism. We can't be this kind of biting, sarcastic, passive aggressive kind of columnists. That's not our Buddhist archetype. That doesn't work. So I don't think there are certain qualities, ethics in which I don't think in which writers have to adhere to if you really want to be Buddhist.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Thank you so much for the question. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting. Like what not to think about. The other thought I had, Raymond, as you were talking was like self-indulgence.
Yeah.
And so I think you spoke to that though. You talked about your audience and you thinking about your audience, investing that time. And it's really hard to tell when you're being self-indulgent or inspired, in my experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was very self-indulgent back in the day. Now these days I'm a lot more humble. Now I'm a lot more humble. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great. So any other questions around?
May I indulge myself
Yes,
next?
please.
Thank you.
Inspired.
I don't know about that. Hi, Raymond. This is Jue Wei, and the camera will come to me soon. Hi.
Hi,
Thank
Venerable.
you so much. Thank you
Mm.
so much for telling us about the insights of what it's like to be a Buddhist journalist. I didn't realize how actually you give a perspective onto perhaps a tradition or a Buddhist personality, etc., from, I guess, that level that would inspire readers. Because coming from an insider position, I know of many in our organization, for example, who will tell a story and then after that will complain. The journalist never wrote, as I told them.
Yeah.
So I don't intend to write. I have no intention of writing. That's not my strength. Writing is not my forte. However, if I have interesting research results that I would like the Buddhistdoor Global to present, what is the way to go about doing it? For example, we have a Buddhism in Australia project due to be launched. There is some really, I think, exciting survey results, our fieldwork results. Would this be something that, how do I reach out to the various Buddhist organizations like Buddhistdoor?
Oh, just get my email from Nadine. I'll be more than happy to publish whatever surveys and findings that you have very comprehensively put together for Buddhism in Australia. And so that's something that I think our website would be very interested to do.
Oh, great,
The other thing,
great.
though, is that you captured your Humanistic Buddhism Symposium, and I wondered if the way that happened was through media release.
No, how did it get to Buddhistdoor? I would like to know.
So there was a Humanistic Buddhism Symposium that the Buddhistdoor reported on recently, and I had the thought perhaps a media release was sent to you, and you receive media releases sometimes with photos and things, and you, if you like,
Yeah,
that's another
possibly.
way.
I'm proud of working with two. We have a small team, two great colleagues, and as well as an administrative team. So I'm sure it must have reached our team inbox somewhere, and we all have our different foci as well. But look, if you think it might be more appropriate that I work on it, and we set up a communications, then I'm always around. I'm always available. So.
That's great. Thank you so much. That's lovely. What a great response. Okay. Is that good?
Yeah, that is. Sometimes I wonder if there's a way we have to pitch ourselves to various magazines so that we can be profiled. Yes. And do you have any ideas how we do that? I'm sure you receive lots of mails in the inbox. So how do we highlight ourselves in the process?
That's a good question. I think it's simply through contacting the right people. Many publications, media platforms, I think they do have a point of contact, and depending on who you want to reach out to, I'd be more than happy to do a bit of digging.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. There's a question in the chat, which is from, can you see that, Raymond?
Yes.
Thank you for this opportunity. Can you please mention how to get connected to other Buddhist magazines to publish my article? I'm from Nepal.
Always always go on their website. My understanding, you can go on the websites of many Buddhist publications. There's always a general inquiry, and they usually, I think the current platforms these days are probably Lines Raw, Tricycle. Those are probably the main English language publications these days.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks. Okay. Anyone else online wanting to ask a question? Sasha, hey, nice to see you.
Hi, hi Nadine.
Mhm.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay. Thank you, Raymond, for all this beautiful talk, and I'd like to thank you for the 910. It's really lovely to see my lecturer, Nadine, and the Benwaju and all the colleagues. I'm an alumni from NTI, recently passed out for information. So when I was listening to your talk, you said that you just covered as a Buddhist journalist, you covered the story of the different master from the monastery, etc. So at the end
Yes.
of the day, how do you validate their information? Is it really true or no? Because you also mentioned that some of the articles or the literature that was written the long time ago is not really relevant these days. So how do you validate?
No, I wouldn't say it's relevant. I'm just saying, I'm not saying it's irrelevant. I'm just saying it shows its age. In fact, I think, you can actually build your own perspective based on what has come before. We definitely
Okay.
do not want to denigrate or devalue
Mm-mm.
the wisdom of what has come before. But I simply think that it's to validate what is true and what is not. Look, I'm not a religious teacher.
Mm-mm.
I cannot speak on saying, oh, how do you validate this according to the Dharma, apart from the traditional ideas of,
Mm-mm.
does it conform with the Four Noble Truths,
Mm-mm.
the Noble Eightfold Path. I think we'll always
Mm-mm.
begin from basics. But apart from that,
Mm-mm.
what do journalists do? Check and verify. And I think in this sense, that's another similarity that decent media, good journalism, and Buddhists actually have in common. We verify.
Mm-mm.
We verify. We are we don't say, oh yeah, I guess that's it then, right? We do try to verify.
Okay.
Hmm.
Thank you.
And you also quote others. So it's not that
Yeah.
you're saying this is true. You're saying this person said this. And
Yes.
so
Mm-mm.
where you can't verify facts, right? You're attributing it to someone else. So there are mechanisms that you use across the board. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, that's great. That's really wonderful. Okay, anyone else? I think we have probably reached our time together. I just so appreciate you, Raymond. This has been one of the most stimulating conversations I've had in such a long time, and
Thank you so
learning
much,
something
Nadine.
so new and just really exciting as well.
Can I
Yeah, Venerable.
put in a pitch for next NTI Conversation?
Yeah.
So next
Oh, yes,
week,
yes.
next week and the 29th of July, Wednesday at 1 o'clock. If you're interested, please join me and Professor Andrew Singleton from Deakin University to present our Buddhism in Australia survey findings. So it'll be a first look, a first set of analysis of over 2,000, almost 3,000 responses coming back from all around Australia.
Great. Okay,
Yes.
put that in your diary. That's wonderful. And yeah, wishing you well on your travels, Raymond. And I'm going to listen back to this. So we'll pop it on our site, and hopefully many other people will listen. So take care. And yeah, thank you.
Nadine, Venerable, everybody, thank you so much. It's been an honor being with you today. And thank you for having me as part of your distinguished series. Thank you very much.
Keep up the good work. See you later.
Thank you,
Thank
Nadine.
you.
See you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Raymond.
Thank you, Raymond. Goodbye.